This journey doesn't start at home, like most others do. No, this one starts 1000 kilometers south, in the German town of Stuttgart. For the last month, I had been down there filming a commercial for a company. A summer job, basically. Some people ask me why I wouldn't just get a job at McDonald's, flipping burgers and be done with it. But where's the fun in that? The perspective? These questions would always be asked by the same kind of people. People who would never further their horizons. Stationary people. This film is devoted to them. To showing them why risking everything is worth it to get out of your comfort zone. Because I'm not born to be stationary. I'm born to explore. In 2017, I biked the Sunshine Coast and Vancouver Island. In 2018, I biked the North American West Coast. So of course I had to top that for 2019. This resulted in a somewhat crazy idea. There's a mountain bike trail going through the Rocky Mountains from Canada to Mexico called the Great Divide. So after my commercial shoot was done, I packed my things and flew to Canada, with one question in mind. How do experiences like these change our perspective on the world? In my bag I had a small camera and a drone, ready to find the answer to just that question. Alright, it's 10 minutes to 3. Let's make some breakfast. This will be a long day, no doubt. The first flight leaves at 6, arriving in Copenhagen 1.5 hours later. This is where I meet up with my parents. Of course I won't be doing a trip like this alone. My parents have always been up for adventures. We make our way through airport security. Somehow I always manage to get searched. Carrying a drone in your hand luggage makes flying, no pun intended, kinda difficult. Boarding our flight to Heathrow, we leave Scandinavia behind. While flying out over the Baltic Sea, I get a look at Sweden. It's been a month since I left, and it will be another one until I cross that border again. Our aircraft is late, as usual. Taxi takes forever, as usual. While still in the plane, we make a plan how we're going to rush it to the next one. We are aware that our bags aren't gonna make it, but that's a problem for later. We make it last second. Over the years I have started giving the aircraft a light slap before boarding, and as I have yet to be in a plane crash, I will continue until I am proven that this gesture doesn't actually higher my chance of survival. Arriving late in the evening, the luggage guys at the airport are basically flooded with tired travelers from Copenhagen whose luggage didn't make it. Since last year's fiasco with British Airways, I always pack one set of underwear in my hand luggage. First up, airport hotel. The next days are spent continuously driving to and calling the airport about the luggage. It's always a hassle. Missing is one bike and all the equipment. My camera and drone always travel with me in the cabin, take a guess why. We make our way into downtown Calgary and buy 2 bikes. My first front suspension mountain bike. Of course I'm jumping over everything like a child. Our bag arrived. We are finally ready to leave the city behind us. After having smuggled the bikes up to the hotel room the night before, we fully packed bikes leave the elevator in the morning of day 4. Getting out of the city is always a mess. It doesn't help that big cars in Europe are considered small cars in North America. The traffic lightens up once you get out of the suburbs and enter the 1A. On day 5, we are crossing a native reserve. The weather is great, the scenery is amazing, and we have the wind against us. While fighting to get past the plains that separate Calgary from the Rockies, I find a GMC logo lying in the ditch. I mounted on my bike rack and named my bike. My new companion is now called GMC. That's short for Grandma Cycle. Having just exited the native reserve, we see a huge thunderstorm rolling in. Before shit hits the fan, excuse my language, we decide to put up a tent and wait it out. With the bad timing it is, we have our first encounter with the animal kingdom of Canada. What later reveals itself to have been a stray dog. Apparently the paws look different on wolves. We are sure we are encountering a wolf. Stupid filmmaker I am, I grab my camera and start filming. My mom grabs the bear spray. On edge as we were, being out in the middle of nowhere and bracing for the storm, we were happy as he scurried away. We reached the Rocky Mountains by lunch. Still, the wind against us, we see more thunderclouds rolling through the valley we just entered. After making it to Canmore, it starts pouring rain. This is where we meet Claude. Claude is a biker, who we invited to sit with us and share a muffin. After sitting in the rain for long enough, something that sucks in normal life, but is way worse when you're on a bike trip, we bought a blue tarp. Later, Claude came back with a whole 6-pack of muffins, and then it was on. Both of our groups decided it would be a stupid idea to head out in the rain, and that we would stay another day. I of course asked Claude if he could give me an interview, and he said, well, no. After bribing him with some more muffins, he finally agreed and let me film him. He had previously been traveling around Canada, but he had something very interesting to say.
So my experience is, because I have been mostly alone all my life, you know. So people, because my tastes were so different than others. I didn't fit in society in general. I was not a hunter. I was not a fisherman. I was not a hockey player or drinker. So anybody would not be compatible with me, let's say. Compared to them, they would say, oh, I'm boring. I am very boring, to say. So I was more secluded. But as time goes by, I start to realize that, because I kept away from the people most of the time, but now I start to realize that the people makes the difference. It's the contact. That's the goal is the people. The more you share with the people along your way on your trips, this is what you will remember. This is what you will cherish more. This is what I'm realizing now that I am older and wiser.
Gray head.
On comb and all that, on shave and all that, yeah. But that doesn't matter. It's the contact with the people that is the richness of the adventure. That makes the adventure worthwhile. Mm-hmm. Yeah. More than the scenery. Scenery is beautiful, but it's the people. It's the key. It's the people. Mm-hmm. That's my take. My experience so far. Meet so many nice people. It's amazing. Take you for example. You accepted me just like that. I was afraid to be a bother. You know, I was afraid. I don't want to impose too much. I don't want to be. You know, I was concerned. But I don't know that. You know. Mm-hmm. But you made me feel at home. Yeah. And you're sharing your food. The first thing you did, you share your muffin. And then you share. You gave me a beer. You know.
We shared one muffin and get 6 back today. 2 beer.
No, I ate one.
Okay.
You had 5. But that's the pleasure of life. That's the key, is being with people.
I have noticed this to be true a couple of times in my life. Not just on this trip, but all of them. Of course, there will always be idiots in life, but the vast majority of people are helpful. And then it doesn't matter what color your skin is, where you come from, or what differences you have to them. These people just want to help you. At this point, I'd like to quote Fredrika Ek. Fredrika is a woman from Sweden who biked around the world, and she posted her trip on her blog. And the further away she got from home, the more people got worried about her and started posting comments in her blog. And one of those comments said, "They will chase you out of their villages." And that comment kind of struck with me. And apparently it struck with Frederique as well, because as she entered one of those villages and bought some fruit from a young woman, she heard footsteps running behind her as she left the village. And that comment came to mind: "They will chase you out of their villages." And she soon knew that she couldn't get away from the runner, so she stopped. It was the young woman from the shop. She had overpaid her by a couple of cents. So that young woman left her shop and ran after her to return her the cents she overpaid. They will chase you out of their villages. The following days we made our way to Banff and started the Great Divide. As the kilometers per day get less and the terrain get rougher, the trip got more and more awesome. Away from all the hassle of civilization, fully embracing the wilderness. One time we couldn't go any further, so we hit up a trail, scared to get kicked out by the ranger, or worse, get visited by the friendly neighborhood grizzly. That night, hell broke loose. Days from civilization, on a trail in the middle of nowhere. The mountains showed their full wrath. I was lying in my tent as the whole sky lit up, making it lighter than daylight. For some minutes, I just witnessed this crazy miracle. Then the rain hit. Scared that my tiny one-man tent wouldn't hold up this rage of nature, I grabbed my equipment and put it in my sleeping bag with me, believing it to be the safest place if I get swept off that mountain by a rain tsunami. No tsunami swept me off any mountains that night, luckily. Nevertheless, at 6 in the morning we were ready to leave, although it was still pouring. I was motivated as hell. Something about that night had made me extremely hyped. Something not even the fact that I was dripping wet could change. Good morning. It is like 6 in the morning on day 11. It's been raining shitballs and tonight was a thunderstorm. Life is beautiful. Let's get this shit started. Got my sunglasses on. Let's go. Holy, it's windy. You got to let it go. Civilization on a map can be a big disappointment. That's something I learned on my first long-distance bike trip on Vancouver Island in 2017. After days in the wild, every little named dot on the map seems like a city to you. When you arrived at said dot, it turned out that it was just a street crossing with a burnt down shack. But sometimes, if you are lucky, that dot is an outpost where you can resupply. Maybe even get some nice microwave pizza. You have no idea how good that can taste if you haven't eaten one after days of old bread, half molten cheese, and water you get out of a river a couple of kilometers back. That resupply was a big necessity, because we were the furthest away from any towns that we would be on the whole trip. About 3 days in each direction. Of course, just as we reached that desolate place, our second encounter happened. Having pushed our bikes up the Elk Pass, we came across 3 grizzlies, in probably the worst bear combination south of the polar circle. A mother with 2 cubs. As you have probably guessed by now, I kind of like filmmaking, and yeah, you know the rest. Camera goes out and action! Excuse the shaky footage, I had to fumble with my bear spray. As we were later told, bears don't see very well. That way the mother didn't see us. But as the wind turned, she noticed us. She did not charge. She did not come running. She was totally chill actually. Slowly she advanced, and we kind of hauled ass down that mountain. That evening we found a hut. I don't believe in destiny and fate and all that, but sometimes the universe smiles to you. covered in the names of hundreds of people who had set up camp in that hut over the last century. We could sleep without having to worry about any animals. Well, apart from these damn mice that kept running around my panniers. At this little hut, we met Lynn. Lynn was a former ranger who decided the bike was to prefer over a pickup when exploring the wild. Lynn had a companion, Bob. Lynn had a kind of love-hate relationship with Bob. Alright, there wasn't much love in that relationship, seeing how much Bob held Lynn back. See, Bob was her bike trailer. Anyways, we started talking. First about the bears, later about biking in general, and after that a little bit about everything. Like with Claude, I asked her if she could give me an interview. Like with Claude, Lynn was telling me she wasn't great in front of cameras. Now of course I didn't have any more muffin bribes, but eventually she agreed to give me a statement. Lynn, the stage is yours.
Well, you learn to live with the basics. So you realize after you've been out for a week that everything you need in life is with you, whether you're canoeing or biking or backpacking, and you really don't need more than that. It also makes you appreciate what you have when you go home. Mm-hmm. The little things like running water, a flush toilet, but really you can survive with a lot less. So you become more of a minimalist, I think. Nature, I mean, I've lived in nature my whole life. Since I was a little baby, my mother carried me on her back, backpacking. So it's second nature for me, no pun intended. But nature is, I think for most people though who aren't familiar with it, it's really good for them to go as well and experience it. And even if it means just hiking a day trip out of your vehicle for the day and then going back to your car, at least you're dealing with some hardships maybe, which make you more resilient.
The next few days we biked through the Elk Valley, a really long valley with dirt roads that ended in the paths we had previously crossed. So, apart from a couple of other bikers, we had our peace. In the evenings we met up with Lynn and Bob and finally reached civilization again. And when you expect it least, a black bear appears right in front of you. 10 meters from the campground, between a highway and a golf course. Basically in the middle of town. Well, he seemed more scared than we, so we continued. So last year's trip down the west coast of the United States ended with a knee injury. So far, I hadn't had any problems with my knee, but on this day, it reappeared. Without warning, an exploding pain in my knee. Some kilometers later, it disappeared as quickly as it had come. That was enough to set an ending point to our trip though, and we set up camp in Fernie, a little town 100 kilometers north of the border to the States, with a great amount of hiking routes and mountain bike trails. We stayed while Lynn and Bob grabbed a bus back to Calgary. We went on an amazing hike up a mountain, and at a tiny mountain lake, I thought I had found the perfect place to share my experience on journeys like this one. Alright, so I want to talk a little bit about why I think that these kind of trips change you as a person. I think that I would never have gone to Vancouver if we wouldn't have been on these kind of trips before, if my parents wouldn't have taken me out in the world at a young age already to see that there's more to life than just your own 30-kilometer radius around your home. I don't think I would have had the courage to actually take that upon me and apply there. We'll see how that goes next year. If I wouldn't have been on these kind of trips, I wouldn't have met a lot of awesome people. I would have a totally different view on the world, and I believe that a lot of the rise of right wing nowadays it's getting political, bear with me, comes from that people do not take these kind of trips, that they stay in their own safe radius, their 30-kilometer radius. And I believe that if we wouldn't be viewing people who go biking the Great Divide mountain bike route, or who say, hey, I want to go 1,000 kilometers south from a summer jog to some commercial because that's what I love. If we wouldn't view these people as different, and if we wouldn't view different as something bad, then we wouldn't have a lot of problems nowadays. People would follow their dreams more, and society would be a lot more peaceful, I believe, and more accomplished. Also, there's been a squirrel making noises behind the camera the whole time because I think I'm scary. Sorry. Yes, I know you're very loud, yeah.
What do you do when you have knee problems and can't bike back to Calgary? You rent a U-Haul. Not only can you easily fit the bikes and equipment of like 20 bikers in a U-Haul, but the little compartment above the driver's cabin makes for an excellent sleeping place. Making our way back to Calgary in a motorized vehicle took only a fraction of the time it took us by bike. In 2 days we were back at our starting point. This is where I'm also going to end this film. Back in civilization, on my way back to my normal routine. 2 months after I had left Sweden, I would return. My home hadn't changed much, but I had. This made the difference even greater, but that's something you only feel when you do something. After the last frame has faded off the screen, take a minute to visualize your comfort zone. Where's the border? How much would you have to push yourself to stretch that border? And would that not be worth it? There is so much more outside of that 30-kilometer radius around your house. Because we are not born to be stationary. We are born to explore.